Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today we're going to do a Tonalist watercolor landscape painting. Currently, I've been playing around with experimenting, taking lamp black and mixing it with various earth colors, earth pigments. So far, we did lamp black and raw sienna. We did lamp black and two yellow ochres. How to find a different way to approach and get nice rich tones with that one. Today we're going to look at lamp black and burnt sienna. Coincidentally, I have Da Vinci brand for so far all the earth colors and earth pigments that I've been going through. I'm not sure if that expands my entire palette. I'll have to look and see, but if not, I'll try. If so, I'll try to keep it within Da Vinci brand. Reason being is that I have read on some websites, I think handprint.com, that if you were to look at an earth pigment and work within a set of earth pigments, the particular brands themselves may base the different pigments off of each other, and the different hues, etc., that you get are in relationship to each other within that particular brand. And plus, I like Da Vinci brand. I like the Van Gogh brand and the Cotman brand. Those are all very good, really affordable. And maybe Da Vinci brand might see this and maybe they want to send some pigments my way. That'd be great. Anywho, I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua and I thoroughly saturated with water. I'm going to do the wet and wet just like I have in the previous ones. Kind of using that tonalist approach. I always mention Stuart Davies and Dennis Sheehan, where they'll take their oils, wipe on and wipe off, and let the scene create itself. That's what I'll do here. I used to use a lot of burnt sienna, especially whenever I had first started painting. I would watch Rick S. on YouTube, and he would use raw burnt sienna and ultramarine back and forth to create his dark and to vary the warmth and the coolness of the mixture, just the kind of the color temperature of it, and just go back and forth between the two. At the same time, the Zoltan Szabo books that I was going through utilized that mix as well. So burnt sienna was just very common on palettes, even in the Ron Ransom palette and James Fletcher Watson. I don't use burnt sienna as much as I used to. I feel that personally for me, burnt umber has kind of taken its place, where I'll use a light red oxide for my more reddish warmth as well. So I'm a little bit not quite sure what type of tonal shifts we'll see, and how things will dry, how things will loosen up and lighten up. So that's kind of a big part of exploration, is seeing what your pigments do and inherently just starting to get a feel for which ones you got to apply heavier because they're going to dry lighter, which ones are going to you can apply light and they'll dry just fine. The scene is going to be imaginary. You are, of course, more than welcome to follow along, and you're always welcome to sign your own name to anything that I do, that you do after following one of these videos. And you have my express permission to sell anything you do whenever you follow along. I want you guys to be successful, have money for art supplies, and just have fun. A huge shout out to everybody that supports this channel through the Patreon and through Etsy purchases. I have exclusive content up there, but thank you all who donate and help with the procurement of different supplies. Those of you that like and subscribe and comment, I appreciate that as well. It gives me good feedback. I just need to catch up on the comments. I just haven't had a chance to do that. So far with this color combination, I'm getting a very Conte crayon, Trois crayon feel, where you would have the sanguine or sanguine, and the burnt sienna is essentially taking that role. You would have your black, which in this case I have the lamp black, and you have your white chalk, which in this case would be the white of the paper. So that's the vibe it's giving currently. So far with lamp black, I found heavier applications is necessary. The tonal shift is ginormous whenever I'm painting wet and wet. So just heavier application. I've talked about how some areas could dry splotchy, so I kind of push splotched areas around. Yesterday, I had went longboarding, and I got a half marathon in, and I had my personal best for average miles per hour. I finally hit 10 miles per hour as my average. But that being said, the reason I bring it up is I use my right foot to push mainly, and coincidentally, so that my right hand will push forward. So as my right foot goes back, my right hand goes forward. And I hurt my shoulder doing that, I guess throwing my hand forward essentially yesterday. So much to the point when I had gotten home, I legit thought I had tore my rotator cuff. It had felt like just a knot of all knots in my shoulder where I couldn't even move my arm. I had iced it and took some Aleve, took a hot bath, all that. And fortunately, the pain and the lack of movement being at a 10 yesterday is down to a 2 today. So I think I maybe just sprained or pulled something, hopefully. But the reason I mention that is that I use this left hand, or the right hand, I don't know why I messed that up, to lift and to play with what we have going on. But I'm really, really babying my right arm. So it's funny because I wouldn't consider myself ambidextrous at all because I don't paint with my right hand, but I do a lot of the scraping and the paper towel with the right hand. So so that's going to be a little off today. And I probably won't do as much as I usually would do with my right arm during a painting. So anyway, keeping an eye on that, and I'll keep you all posted. So back to this color combination. Once again, it gives the sanguine feel. It also gives a kind of Halloween fall season type vibe. You could probably really come in with that burnt sienna and build up those trees and get that time of year going. When mixing the lamp black with a raw sienna or the yellow ochre, you get a kind of very dark olive green, and I think that would work as well if we were to do a triad of colors. Or if you wanted the darker, moodier green, the kind of late autumn red from the raw sienna with the black, the burnt sienna and the black, you probably get some really interesting stuff with the 3-colored. So let me know down below what color combinations you would like to see. I'm pretty sure that there'll be a burnt umber and a light red oxide mixed with a lamp black experiment. But then beyond that, I might move away from the two tube paintings and then experiment with a triad or two. Either the burnt sienna and the yellow ochre and the black, or maybe burnt umber, raw umber, and then black, just to see how much we can use it to accent. Just getting some texture in this foreground, just putting some ideas in place. The paper is still pretty wet. You can see some areas where I could scrape out some of the white, so that's pretty good. But the areas that are dark, they became backfilled and will be darker whenever we get to that. Whenever we do a dry off. I'm going to wind up bringing foreground trees, so I'm just preparing for that. All these like dark dots of that lamp black will dry splotchy, so I'm just trying to change that up a little bit. I personally just don't like that splotchy texture. And it's nothing with the lamp black, because I've seen that happen with the Payne's gray as well. It's almost like that deposit is saying that you hit that saturation point where it's like now it can kind of be itself, where everything around it will want to soften a lot more in relationship to it. Let's grab the number 1 rigger. We can play around back in here. And while I do this, a few things that I've learned so far from these is if I'm going to use the wet and wet phase with just the 2 color combination with black, to stay in the wet phase longer. Because that'll let me go through all the variations of dampness of the paper, and that will affect the tonal shift in a positive way, where we won't have such an extreme tonal shift. The other thing is apply heavy pigments of the black. If I want that to stay in there, we can keep light pigments like that, and that'll stay nice and light. But areas where I want it to be dark, I do need a darker application. In a later stage, whenever we dry off, we can get to the point where we achieve that rich black with no shift whatsoever. We do have the potential of bronzing, which is the over application effect, and it makes it look still wet, makes it look still shiny, but underneath glass you won't really see that effect, so it doesn't really affect it too much after you're done with the painting and displaying it. And there are some ways to kind of get rid of the bronzing effect during the painting process, but that's for another day. I'm going to make a sequence of trees, probably coming up from this area. I could potentially start having some come up in front. I am also thinking of an extreme foreground foliage droppage, like Herman Peckel. I have not tried, is it Heckel or Peckel? Well, he's absolutely fantastic, and if you watercolor, you most likely know who he is. This extreme application in the foreground where it is kind of like the leaves right in front of you. So I might experiment with that. It's definitely kind of like one of his signature applications. So I'm not looking at any of his work at the moment, but kind of just give you an idea of where that comes from. It's always good, you know, to give credit where credit is due, where you got something from. For the most part, a lot of the times, you know, you'll read about Turner, JMW Turner, and a lot of people say a lot of the techniques and applications that we use today with watercolor were essentially invented by him. So nobody's really inventing anything new. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And I'm not like throwing shade at anybody. That's a phrase my students say, throwing shade. Oh, there's some white scrapes back here. You could probably play around, just a light wash. A little too wet in there. So today's Friday, Monday ends the winter break. Go back to work. But did get a decent amount of painting in during the break, and I feel relatively refreshed to the point where I have plenty of energy to paint after work. So I'm looking forward to all that. With the sharp edge, you can do clusters of texture. In fact, let's go throughout doing that and just vary the density of it and the location. Just a quick, easy way. So we can pull any whites out of here. Okay, so that's the level of moisture that we're at. We can put a little bit of washes of branches up in here. A little bit of water, surface texture, and then we'll do our dry off. All right, so let's watch and see how things soften as it dries. I didn't realize we had a glare up here. Sorry about that. Let's see if I can get rid of it. Okay. All right, so we did have quite the tonal shift take place. You can see heavy applied areas of burnt sienna that remained true. A lot of our background stuff softened. Here's some of the splotchiness that I was talking about that can take place with the lamp black or a Payne's gray. Other than that, it does give us a good foundation to paint on top of and come back in with our Hake brush or the number 1 rigger or the number 4 rigger. So let's see. This is still having water in my mixture, so it does soften and lighten. In order for me to get my absolute darks, I have to paint directly from the tube with the lamp black. Joe Menza had commented in the past that I have 3, I think, application levels where I go wet and wet, then I do my dry off, then I do kind of an overall dry brushing or the stage on top of this, and then do one more dry off with kind of darker accents. And as you paint more and more, you'll find the groove that you like. And for instance, I mentioned Rick S. at the beginning of the video with his use of the burnt sienna and the ultramarine, and using that to go back and forth to change the temperature of his darks. He starts off a work with, I think, a pencil drawing, and then from there we'll do an application of the, what's the stuff, the white stuff that resists, frisket. Anyway, he'll use that, then he'll paint, then remove, etc. So people have just their different applications and their kind of process of application that they've developed over time and works for them. So you might like the initial wet and wet and the length that I go with it for, but you might like the way Stephen Cronin wets the whole paper and then kind of feeds in some colors, and then from there does a dry off. David Usher does the same thing. Alan Owen doesn't do a complete wetting of the paper. He'll kind of just pass in spots and have areas that are wet and areas that are dry. And everybody has what they found that works for them or what they want to explore. So, no right or wrong way. And of course, there's nothing wrong with admiring somebody's painting and techniques and not utilizing their painting and techniques. In this stage, as we apply, we can also scrape, but I'm just building up almost the medium value. One thing that's fun is getting a little bit of one color, a little bit of another color on different parts of the Hake brush, and using that to create a variety of application. I want to build up this area here with more trees and see what else we can do. This layer is drying pretty quick, but I can pause it and do a dry off just so you can see where this will shift potentially. I do have to add that within these experiments so far, whether it's raw sienna, burnt sienna, or yellow ochre, their application as a wash in the sky gives just such a great glow and feel to the sky. I have some pigments that are the synthetics of the cadmium colors, and others that are very like strong, but I just never got accustomed to using them as my application for sky. And I think a lot of times I'm grabbing the number 4 rigger and I'm gonna use this to put in some foreground trees. That the painters that I admire from the 1800s, and I've mentioned this before, would have had access to and probably use like the chromiums, the cadmiums, and use that in the paintings that I absolutely admire. But they were also using it in the oils. The watercolors to that period would I'm not quite sure what they would have used. Handprint.com does have a suggested classical palette of watercolor pigments. That's one day maybe I should just put that together and explore. But anyway, for me, if I was to use like cadmium yellow hue in the sky right here, it just doesn't sit correctly for me. And these are just my kind of trials and tribulations with different pigments and stuff that I just don't really use or I ignore in my palette. I think the earth pigments just give me the kind of old world type feel. But that's, you know, my personal approach with it. There's painters that use very vibrant colors. Painters, you know, that will use unnatural colors, something like the Fauvists, and you know their works come out amazing. So it's just a matter of, I guess, what you enjoy, what you're comfortable with, and what works for you. So you could follow this exact same painting using a lemon yellow, and you could just try to push back and forth with the lemon yellow and see how light you can get it, if you can lift up the whites of the paper, if you can get how dark you can get it. It probably wouldn't give you any type of old world type painting feel, but you would still have a painting that would just fall kind of almost in a different genre of painting, or movement of painting, sorry. The softness that we got from our initial dry off does give us great depth of value, just a recession in the image and the picture plane itself. I kind of just personally exploit little tricks in order to create a sense of depth, where softer, lighter tones in the background, and then generally as you move forward in the picture plane, darker tones. Now this isn't true for everything. You could find scenes where your darker tones are in the midground. And I experienced that when I was doing a little bit of studies of, I think, was it Thomas Girton? And I saw that in his watercolors. There's also somebody who probably at this point within the past year, posted on the Ron Ransom page, pointing out in one of his works that he had done that and changed the value in the midground. There's also application of color and a recession of what colors get lost as you recede in the picture plane to create that aerial perspective and as things progress towards blue. But, and this is most likely Carlson's got the landscape painting that I'm quoting here, is that if you could have a color in the midground, let's say this dark black, you might have that same dark black in an object in the background. The example he gives is maybe like a yellow group of flowers. The yellow might appear in the background and the foreground. Just make the object larger in the foreground, give it a larger perspective than the one in the background to allow that size reception to take place. Like here I'm putting this foliage, then I can come more intense with that foliage. And I have water on the ink brush, so I'm going to pull water out like that to take those type of marks and that type of darkness and just make it more detailed and a little bit darker right here. And then that stands it out against this background. But since I'm adding water, it is going to have that tonal shift again. So I think we did, I think this is after the second dry off. So this is kind of our third layer. And of course you can dry again and play around. We might wind up doing that with this one, just to do literally just straight from the tube. A few other things to note. The camera itself, so I'm using my phone to film these. It does give it a little bit of a warmer, darker feel looking at it through the camera when it films. I'm not sure why. It's just with any type of screen, I think that happens. And what else was I going to say? The tonal shift. I wanted to comment that the tonal shift not only makes it lighter in value, I find that it also cools it in temperature. Where if something is red and warm, it kind of cools to a kind of duller, browner matte whenever I do a dry off. So I talk a lot about the color shift, the tonal shift taking place, but I feel like there's a temperature shift taking place as well that I don't think I've really seen addressed anywhere. You can really play around with the number one rigger. This is where I personally will start kind of complaining and getting a little just antsy at the small individual branches, where it's like I would like to find a way for a quicker illusion of that. I think that's what essentially Stuart Davies does whenever he is slapping an oil painting with a part of a rag. It's just adding kind of textural marks. I need to go back and watch some of his videos. He has uploaded some more stuff lately. He was having some health issues, and he was posting about it online. I think he's on the mend, which is really good. like fantastic to hear. So I have been enjoying taking the black and dotting it in. I also like the texture that appears whenever you're essentially stamping with the side of the #1 rigger. It's more just that line stamp, but you can do a sideways brush if you have enough moisture on there. There's I think it's a Mr. Gary that shows up on my feed quite often. He was doing some landscape work quite a bit with charcoal, and it looked absolutely just so realistic. I had messaged him asking him some questions. I friended him on Facebook. He unfortunately is going through health issues as well, but there's so many amazing painters out there that I think we all need to know about and learn about. I didn't try the Herman Peckel close foliage thing. I wonder if I should try that, or if I should try that on top of a pre-existing painting and spend time solely on exploring. I'll call it like a Peckel approach. I think that's what'll happen, because we're almost at 40 minutes here, and I don't want the videos to be too long. You know, sometimes I can get the videos down to 20 minutes. I sometimes break the videos up into part 1 and part 2, but due to like the way things release on YouTube, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle if I do 2 parts, or if I accidentally put one of them up on the Patreon as a Patreon exclusive, and then the other one is part 2 that's up there for everybody. I don't think people enjoy that. I can create this little edge right here. But notice how I'm not doing a complete straight line, I'm just letting it break. I think that'll soften some. So yeah, we'll look for a previous work to do the Peckel effect over. So let's sign this. I'm going to do one last dry off so you can see how that looks. I use either the micron pen or the Repeatometric Petrograph filled with platinum carbon ink. If it's still wet, it doesn't write the best on it. Never got the hang of painting my name onto something. Let me pause this for a last dry off. All right, we feel pretty dry with this. One thing to note about this color combination is that you can really rely on that mixture of the two to get your dark values. In the past 2 other experiments, I had relied just almost on black straight from the tube. So I think that is probably the benefit of the burnt sienna so far, is the fact that we can mix that there and get, rather than straight black for our darkest values, we can do a mixture of the two, and we can play around with that dark value. So that's going to be very important when we make a kind of bigger palette. Also here, just once again, just the washes of that in the sky just seem to work very well. So I hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, follow, and I will talk to you all soon. Have a great day.